Hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm excited today to be here with two legends in the church world, the Skit guys, Tommy, Eddie. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Tony.
I was thinking about how to kick off this interview, and I thought that I would ask this question first. And Eddie, we'll start with you. How would you describe your calling and what the Lord has called you to in your life? Because I was trying to think about all the accolades I could put with you guys, and I was like, oh, podcasters, actors, authors. But I was really like, man, what did God call them to? How would you describe it? And then Tommy will go right after Eddie.
Great.
Tommy invited me to church when I was 17 years old, September 17th, 1987. And I don't remember what was said or what was sung that night, but I knew I needed a savior. And it was as if Jesus stepped out of heaven into my heart, changed my life.
Mm.
And it was it was very, and you said a great word, calling. And I think that word isn't used a lot anymore. But once I entered the church in the 80s and the 90s, that was a big word, calling. What is your calling? I wish that word would come back more. So that was a main question once I became a believer. What's my calling? What am I going to do? What am I going to do for God? How am I going to make him famous? Um, and it really, I think it probably was a year later that my calling was, well, I'm going to work in the church. I'm going to be a pastor. And I started out as a youth pastor. Because back in the 80s, there was, even though we were doing skits and we were even doing skits for big church and youth and that kind of stuff, there was no realm of thinking that there was going to ever be skit guys or full time this. And so, but the calling really was to shepherd people. The calling was, I could probably do a lot of things with my life, but this calling, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to help people. I'm supposed to love the church. I do remember when I was 18, and we got to be interns at a church in California, and we got to sit down with this man named Howard Hendricks. I didn't know who he was, but he was, big author, Dallas Theological Seminary. I mean, just a master, right? I look back and I go, I had no idea who this older gentleman was in front of us, but we all got to ask one question as interns. And I said, and I, as a 18, 19-year-old kid, just going, why do you do what you do? And he goes, well, I wanted to be a doctor. I could have been a doctor, but he goes, my calling, what, instead of saving lives on a medical table, it was to save lives, to share
Mm.
with him Jesus. And at 19 years old, that kind of solidified my calling. I could do a lot of things, but even in my arrogant 19-yearness, I was like, that's it. Like, okay, that I felt that, and he just said it. That's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, yeah, I would piggyback on that. Eddie and I like to say that we're pastors more than pranksters. In the line of work that we have, there's a lot of jokes, there's a lot of humor, and so you can very easily get pigeonholed as a couple of pranksters. And the truth of the matter is, we see what we do as a ministry, and that while there will be so much laughter and so much fun, there's always a message behind what is happening. And my buddy Eddie, he was very kind to compliment me and inviting him to church later on in life. He would allow me and help me find something called a life plan. And I sat down with a guy for about 3 days and went through my whole life
Mm.
and what had happened. And you could see God's hand just molding. And coming out of that, I had not just this calling to be a pastor, but this also understanding that the way God created me was to share joy and to help people see the possibility of change. And so, like, to me, that's really kind of the thing that motivates me.
So you guys have been doing ministry together for over 30 years now, and that's
Mm-hmm.
incredible. That's wild to think about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I would be interested. I bet you guys have a really unique perspective. How have you seen the church change? Right, because you guys walk alongside local churches. You go in,
Mm-hmm.
you're kind of a catalyst in a lot of ways. You put out a lot of resources. Um, what have you seen? I'm kind of curious if you guys would give your thoughts on the status of the local church and compared to where it was and where it is now.
Tony, that's a loaded question. We could do we could do multiple podcasts on the good and bad changes of the church. I will choose to focus on, one thing that I love that has changed in the church, and that is when we started doing skits in the '80s. Um,
Mhm.
Nobody laughed. Like you do your whole show, you do things that you're like, I know this is funny, and they would just sit there,
Yeah.
and after the show is over, and you're shaking people's hands, the glorification of the worm, as they call it, they're then at that point they're like, man, I'll tell you what, that's some funny stuff, man. I never seen anything so funny. You guys are cracking me up. And we're like going, we thought you were dead. Like we had no idea. And then later on, somebody taught us that, back in the day, it was disrespectful
Mm,
to laugh in the sanctuary. And so through the past 30 years that we've been together, we've been able to slowly watch people realize that, oh, this building where we meet is supposed to be a place that is filled with joy, and it should be filled with laughter and hope. It doesn't have to be stoic. So that's one big change that I think we've seen.
Yeah, I would just piggyback off that, Tony. It's sometimes very surreal. No, and what we get to do this. It's not a got to.
Mm,
It's a get to.
mm,
We're not
yeah.
entitled to this. No one is deemed this. Whenever we start thinking that we're bigger than we are, any of us, whatever we do,
Mhm.
I mean, and we start thinking, "No, I got to do this," then we're in a lot of trouble. So there's a lot of
Right.
beauty to get to do what we get to do, and to have seen in the '80s when no one would laugh and my back would sweat. I'm like, well, what are we doing? Um, to be in front of people now, church, services, or a family night where there's 1,000 people and there's all ages, 2 to 200, so to speak, and you're hearing laughter. It really is that thing that I sometimes just marvel as they're laughing, going, I remember when no one would laugh. I remember when this was so disrespectful. So there has been a lot of freeing up, in all of that, and it's been a beautiful get to see this. We've also got to be, uh, privy to some of these screenings, and to know people are laughing, as they watch it, as little kids to adults. Little adults are laughing at things little kids have no idea about, and vice versa. So it's a beautiful thing to be a purveyor of laughter in that way, because it is good medicine. It does heal a lot of worries and hurts.
Yeah, and when you're at that show and the 200-year-old person laughs, that
You know,
that's
you got,
just
yeah.
money. That's
you
precious.
killed it
That's
right there. You literally killed
Yeah,
that's
it.
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's dry bones, Tony. That's dry
That's it,
bones
buddy.
coming
That's
alive
it.
right there. That's good stuff. That's biblical. That's biblical.
How do you guys deal with the pressure to be funny all the time, right? Like, I mean, you guys have been doing this for a long time. Like, creating content at an excellent level over an extended period of time is really hard work, and you guys seem to make it like an act of worship.
Mm.
What's the secret um, to producing that much content for this length of time? And I don't mean to make you guys sound like you're super old. You're not super old, but 30 years is a long time to it's a long time to do ministry. It's a long time
It
to
is.
work in the church, like
Yeah. I think we're both plugged into our local churches, which our youth minister back in the day, he was like, no matter what happens, and again, no matter what happens, like what does that even mean, right? Like we're gonna do skits, and then we're gonna go work
Yeah,
at a church, right? I'm gonna be an education pastor at some point, right? Like that was it, right? Um, so
and I'm gonna manage a Chick-fil-A. Those are the 2
see,
options.
those are the two options.
Yeah.
So I think we've always been plugged in local church. Like this weekend, I'm filling in for my pastor, preaching. Tommy's a teaching pastor at his church. I think being plugged in, which we've seen so many people, so many bands, speakers, you name it, across the 30 years that just rose to success and prominence, and then you don't hear from them anymore because they stopped going to church. They
Hmm.
had the greatest church experience on the weekends or at a conference, and then they don't take their families to church because they're tired. um, we stay plugged into the local church, and I think, again, it goes with that get to. Then you get to look at what we get to do and create for churches, and we take that comedy so seriously, because we know churches all across the country. Um, need something. A pastor just needs something just to segue this music to this to this. And so we don't make it about us. We really do try to go, how can we help the pastor? How can we help the music minister? How can we help the creative arts director or even the volunteer who has a full-time job but they're at their church? Those are the things that always stay in our heads. And I think that keeps it fresh.
Yeah, I would add to that, like, because we're in the local church, we get what is funny and what is off limits, you know?
Yes.
And so, like, a lot of
Yes.
times you'll see, I don't know, Christian comedians or whoever, and the church kind of becomes their foil for their
Hmm.
comedy. And you know what you probably noticed in the movie, Tony, like there's no making fun of the church, there's no
Hmm.
making fun of Christianity. You know, it's walking alongside and going, there's great things. I mean, over the years, we should be able to laugh about a lot of things that we do in church that are silly, but it's never making fun of the church. And I
Ever.
think, you know, Eddie, you said something and I never thought about it before. But yeah, we are both still plugged in. And it is that reminder that the church is not a stepping stone to something else. Like the
Mm.
church is the bride of Christ, and
Yeah.
it is a privilege to serve the local church.
Yeah.
I actually really love the way that you guys honored not just the local church, but you also honored the pastor. I was a local church pastor for a
Mhm.
long time, and in the movie,
Mm.
he gets to have a little heart to heart, and it's super funny, and it's a really honoring film to the local church, and at the same time wrestling in some of the tension that, I, as a pastor, I identified some of my tension with with the pastor in the film, and I thought that was very well done. And again, not everybody's going to get that joke, and that's fine. But I got it and laughed out loud, and my wife laughed at me laughing out loud. So it was good. It was really good.
That's awesome.
Oh,
That's
I know
awesome.
the scene you're talking about, and I really, I for real just kind of got goosebumps thinking about that scene because there's such great humor in that scene, and then it hits this just poignant moment,
Hmm.
you know. And one of the things that we've told people is this movie, the only person that preaches in this movie is the preacher.
Yeah,
Like that's
Hmm.
it, you know. And I
Hmm.
love that. You don't go to
Yeah.
this movie and get preached at, you know.
Yeah. And
I am
and
curious.
everybody's
Oh, go ahead.
imperfect too. Oh, just
Mhm.
Right.
everybody's imperfect. The men have issues, the women have issues. Like there isn't this, and these two men aren't bumbling idiots like, like
Mm-mm.
you would watch on some, 90s and early 2000s sitcoms where it's like, what? Everybody has issues in trying to deal with things and overcome things and allow God to be first. And someone saw the screening and raised their hand, and wasn't really a question. They were just going, "Hey," and it was I think a 20 something young lady, and she just said, "Hey, thanks for making these characters imperfect.
Mhm.
Thanks for making everybody having to have things they got to figure out and either be selfish or point it toward God." And I love that. I love that as
Yeah.
far as what we did in this movie.
I am curious. How do you guys decide on what projects you're going to do? This obviously a full movie like this. That it's a multiple year undertaking. It's a big project. You guys have written books together, like all the things, right? Like, how do you guys decide what God is calling you to next?
Mm.
God, that's a great question. I'm gonna turn it to the movie. I don't really know exactly how to answer your question. I'll let Eddie think about it. He may answer it more eloquently than I can. But I can say about the movie that it's always been a dream. It was that if you've ever had that dream that most of you go says like probably not going to happen, you know. But for me it was that, you know, where normal guys would have a dream to play in the NFL or be in the NBA, and you know, I was never really a good sports guy, so that was never the dream. This was the ultimate dream. And you know, the short version is this: there was a moment in time we'd talked, we'd written scripts, we'd done certain things, and my buddy Eddie prays and says, God, we're done. You know, people had said, hey, why don't you crowdsource it or this, you know, and Eddie just said, you know, God, we're done. If you want us to do this, then we'll do it, but we're not going to force it. And 2 hours later, he got an email from a guy that and it was an acquaintance, a good acquaintance. And the guy said, hey, was thinking about you guys. Have you ever thought about making a movie? You know, and Eddie replied back, yes, you know, and he said, I need to connect you with someone, you know. And then we would get into the weeds if we went on with the story, but that connection was what started the ball rolling to make this movie happen. And the guy that we connected with there opened up helped open up other doors. God used that person. So I think we've said for years, God has just the right people you don't even know, who he brings into your life at just the right time to accomplish what he wants to do. And when you look at what we do, I would say many times it's because God has brought people in and it's opened up a door and we walked through it.
Hmm.
Yeah. Do what you can, what you have, where you're at, and leave the results up to God. Yeah. So for past 20 years, it really was, well, we could do this conference and we could do this, or hey, why don't we think about creating this for the store for skitguys.com? And I think you just have to keep like, if you're on this wave, you've got to keep looking out and going, okay, well, there's a wave, there's a wave, there's a wave, there's a wave. Let's go over there, see what this is like, see what this is like. And it probably wasn't Tony until Fireproof came out that it was like, oh, wait, Jesus films were just on college campuses, supported by Campus Crusade for Christ. Wait a minute. Wait, there's books in Walmart over marriage, over this Kirk Cameron movie. What? Um, so it really was a fit. And I think that's the thing about dreams. Whatever your dreams are, you know, uh, there's a decision to make a dream, whatever that wave is, there's a decision to go after it. And then to keep in mind, there's always going to be delays, there's going to be dead ends, there's going to be difficulties before there ever is deliverance. You're going to hit them. And I think that's where most people give up on the dream that God has put into their heart. When a dead end happens, we go, well, no. When the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and rob something, nope, I heard God wrong. Nope, nope, nope. And we stop in the delays and the difficulties and the dead ends when it comes to a dream. But that dream has been since Fireproof, and no one was asking us to do a movie up until maybe 8 years ago. And it was just a gentleman, and it was just a gentleman. Hey, have you ever thought about this? And we were acting as if. Bottom line, if you look at any of skitguys.com videos, or if you've seen one at your church, behind the scenes, even though it costs money, part of a dream costs money. We were acting as if we were making it like a film set. So it wasn't
Hmm.
like three people. Sometimes you had 17 people, and you had your PAs and the cinematographer and the director. I mean, we did it all. It cost money to do, but at the same time, we were acting as if this dream ever happens, we need to be in the pocket to do it. And so um, we started doing it, but it took a long time. Dreams just take a long time.
I want to add one thing because we're talking about a movie called Family Camp. I also have a dog. But you know, it may seem like we say yes to everything. Like you're talking about, you made a movie, you wrote books, you do these mini movies, you travel and do shows. But there's a sweet lady named Sarah who works for us, and she answers the phone and books all of our shows. And when she first started working for us, she would ask us, "Hey, do you want to do this event?" And we would look and go, "No." And she was like, "Wait, why would you not say yes to everything? If it's ministry, if it's sharing the gospel, why would you not say yes to everything?" And we said, "Our families."
Hmm.
We're not going to say, "My goodness, I don't know what's going on with the dog, but we may have an intruder." But we said, "Not because of our families, because our families come first." And Sarah, what she did was she printed up a picture of Eddie's family and she printed up a picture of my family, and she set them on her desk. And when she would answer phone calls and try to decide whether we would go do an event or not, she would look at our families and go, "Oh yeah, sometimes you have to say no because there's other things that are more important." So the fact that we made a movie called Family Camp, family has always been so vital to us in deciding what we're going to do and what we're not going to do.
The get to is free. Your ministry is free. Now, whatever that. But when the yeses every yes you say to somebody else, you're saying no to your family. So
Mhm,
those no's come with a price. So you have to be really, really cautious and aware of what those no's are,
mhm.
because it is a no to your family at the end of the day. So what does that look like? Yeah.
One of the major themes of the movie is obviously family, but particularly for a dad, and maybe it's just because I identified as a dad in the movie, um, in different seasons of my life. I'm curious, as you guys were putting all of this together, was there anything about like conviction wise that needed to change in your guys' lives? And any because you guys are both family guys, as a part of this. I'm thinking about the dad who's listening, who's like, man, I need to be more committed to my family. Do you have any first steps that maybe was successful for you guys in that process?
Mm,
Mm.
that's convicting. I'll let Eddie answer it.
Mm. I think a huge part of where dads get their insecurity or their inferiority, or just feeling like just let mom do it, or um, we men are such doers, and so we feel like if we're just doing things at work, and if we're maintaining the grass, and we're taking care of the hot water heater, and we're doing, then we're good. And sometimes we just don't stop and just really uh, play with our kids, or I since my kids were little, I was very intentional of going on daddy daughter dates. I mean, I,
Mm.
I have ticket stubs when they were just little kids, and I would just encourage dads, if you've got little kids, go on a daddy daughter date. My daughters at the age of 4 and 5 had no idea what was Ice Age was all about as a movie, or Chicken Little. But I remember going to them and sitting, and sometimes they'd fall asleep. They my One of my daughters fall asleep in cars. Like, I would take them to movies. We'd go to McDonald's and share an ice cream cone, and their face would break out. Oh, they have a dairy allergy. Like, but those are the things. But I in the midst of doing, what's one little moment, what's one little sitting alongside the curb, emotional curb, with your teenager, that you're not trying to fix it, but you're just listening to them. Even it could be nauseating and just long, but you're just listening. You're sitting on the side of the emotional curb, taking it in and just empathizing is a huge word, I think,
Mm,
for dads to not fix, and sometimes to even ask the question, dads, to go, as your wife or a coworker or even your kids going, they're telling you a problem, and to even ask, hey, I'm a fixer. Do you want me to listen, or do you want me to help fix it? And to even ask that question, and for the other person to go, I just want you to listen, and then to shut your pie hole and listen. So
mhm.
those would be little things, I think.
Yeah, that's good. I would say my daughter is 24 and we had a daddy daughter date 2 nights ago.
Okay.
So those things, if that's something that you've started with your kiddos, it can last,
Yeah.
and that's, one of the things, she said to me, she's like, it's been a while since we had a daddy daughter date, and it's pretty great that your 24-year-old wants to do that, um, and we also, both of us had our kids were on set the whole time. Eddie's kids are in the movie. My kids work behind the scenes. We overcame the child labor laws and got that taken care of. No, my kids are both older, but yeah. So I think it was great to have. It was bring your kids to work day every day that we made this movie.
On such a big project like this, I'm curious if there were any particular moments where you're like, "Oh, I can clearly see God in this," or like those kind of like, "This moment could only be made possible because of what God's done." Anything like that really stick out to you in the filming process?
It's that Tony, it's such a difficult question because the answer to that is like every day. I mean,
Mm.
but I can narrow it down a little and say that when we started filming this movie, um, we were the only movie filming in the United States at that moment, and
Oh
there was
wow.
only one other movie filming in the world, and that was because of the pandemic. And what's beautiful is we didn't ignore the pandemic. We had really responsible, smart people who were taking a look at trends and what was happening. And it was towards the beginning, and there was a surge, and then there was a dip. And when that dip hit, they said, "We're making the movie." And so we took precautions and had protocol. But for that time that we're filming, no one got sick. Even though we had groups of extras, large groups of extras, like nobody, there wasn't one case. And we have to look at that and say that seems like a blessing in the midst of everything that was going on. Weather was not a problem. We had one weather issue, and when you film for multiple weeks outside, almost everything we filmed was outside.
Sure.
And we had one. It was the very last night that we were filming. We had literally one shot left to get, not even a whole scene, just a shot, and some storms rolled in. And when we were supposed to be done at 1, I think, in the morning, we were done at 6 in the morning, because of that one delay. But other than that, the weather. So I think that, I don't know that I would go, here's this one thing. I would go, almost daily you saw God not just helping us through the process, but moving in people's hearts. There's stories of crew members, there's stories of actors, whose faith was just rejuvenated, or we saw God do great things. It was crazy to see God move.
That's awesome. Eddie, what about you? Where did you see God move kind of in the filming process of the movie?
Um, one beautiful, it just would make me tear up every day. With all our, we call them mini movies on skitguys.com. A lot of the stuff that we put out for churches, instead of just calling them videos, back in the day we called them mini movies. So that just kind of stuck. It sounded better than video, right? Like something you'd stick in your VHS player. But we had a basically a makeup person that would come on set and do everybody's makeup, and her name is Cynthia. And we have got to just watch Cynthia. I mean, how long has she been with us, Tommy? Over a decade, I guess. Um,
Yeah.
and you get
Yeah.
to watch Cynthia always be on sets around Oklahoma and always helping out. And then, with our movie, she got to be the lead makeup director. She was in charge of about 4 other people that was continually doing all these actors and everybody else's makeup, and going on set, and I mean, they're wearing masks, and but I saw Cynthia stick scripture up on her mirror, in the trailer, and I saw her really lean on God, and I saw her really went from fear to faith, and I think it's those little things when you do relationships with people, you get to see
Mhm.
them come out of their shells and be bigger and better than they thought they were for God's sake. It was truly beautiful to watch that.
So good.
Well, one of the things that's clear is that you guys both have a really intimate relationship with the Lord. I always love to hear from people. What are some of the things that you do on a regular basis to stay connected um, to God, and to make sure that you're kind of in a place where you're starting with God first?
Hmm. I have a really simple memory verse because if it gets too elongated, I won't remember it. But John 3:30 says, He must increase and I must decrease. I mean, if we woke up every day and tried to really live that out, where He must
Mm.
increase and I must decrease, like I think each one of us, no matter how long we've been a faithful follower of Jesus Christ, there's probably 10 decreases that we can make in our life. There's 10 things that we go, ooh, oh, or if you talk to somebody and you're like, hey, how am I doing when it comes to my walk with God? And they will, and they give you the three. And then if you were to go, yeah, but there's 10% you're not saying, tell me that. They're like, I don't know if I should, but if they did tell you those 10% of things that they see, those little character tweaks in you, those things that are just fatal flaws that haven't been fatal yet, those are your decreases. And so every morning I really do try to go, God, I know my stuff. I know how I fail. I want you to increase today, and I need to decrease in these areas that I see really flaming right now, really big. So that's one thing that I try to do is increase and decrease, up and down, and it's hard. It's hard at times.
Yeah, I have a structure. I watch televangelists every day, and it really helps. So
Giving away a lot of money.
no, I
You're
know, right?
poor.
I'm
You're
broke,
broke.
but man, am
You're
I happy.
blessed,
Yeah, but
I
you
broken
feel really
blessed.
blessed, broken
listen.
blessed. No, I'm gonna grab this real quick. Hold on, it's right here. I made a I changed in my quiet time a while back, and it's been a game changer for me. And I'll just share it. I get nothing out of this other than the fact that hopefully it honors God. But they have these little deals. It's just like I'm in Romans right now, right?
Mm.
And it's called a scripture journal. And one page has, the scripture, and the other page is just blank. And so every day when I meet with God, I sit down and I read. I discipline myself, like, I will stop right there. Even though the story goes on, I stop at the end of the page. And I've got a red pen and a black pen. And I just, as I'm reading, I'm underlining the red, like there's from this one, today. And then I just sit down and write whatever comes to my mind. And the idea behind it is not that I'm going to gain, not that I mean, I do gain some knowledge, but it's not that I'm gaining knowledge. It's just trying to be in tune with what I feel like God is telling me in that moment. And sometimes I'll go back and read it and be like, oh, I was off. That was the pizza I ate last night. But sometimes I'll go back and read it and go, wow, yeah, I heard from God this morning. I think that's been a real game changer for me. And I implemented, I'm not a liturgical guy historically, but I found a really great morning prayer. And I pray it every morning because my head's just kind of foggy sometimes in the
Sure.
mornings. And so having something just that I'm going, this is what I'm going to do. And then, yeah, that's kind of what, where I am these days.
Well, one of the things that the movie really talks about is how easily, or kind of demonstrates rather, is how easy it is for guys to become isolated. And you two have been connected for a really long time. Um, what are some of the keys to a long-term, real friendship that maybe that you guys have learned working with each other and being friends for as long as you have?
Tony, I'm glad you asked that. The key is in a book called Smells Like Bacon.
Right.
Um,
And
no, we we did get to write a book about our friendship called Smells Like Bacon, and I'm really proud of it. I
yeah.
think it has like all of those little keys. At least what have worked for us. Well, I actually posted about one today, and that is, the scripture says in Colossians to bear with one another and forgive one another. And I think that you don't have a 30 plus year friendship, not a close one, unless you've learned that sometimes, you don't have to like each other all the time. You don't have to like what the other guy does all the
Mm.
time. Sometimes you just bear with one another, and you remember it's not the actions or the words of a person that caused you to become their friend. It was who they were inside. And then that person who they are inside is still there. And I think it's bearing with one another sometimes, and it's forgiving one another. And over the years, I I don't think either one of us, I mean, maybe we could. I don't think we've kept track of how many times Eddie's forgiven me and how many times I've forgiven him, or how many times I've had to bear with him and he's had to bear with me. You just keep doing it because you love one
Yeah.
another.
I think some friendships stop because one person stops growing. I mean, let's face it, we're all leaders to some extent. I mean, if people are listening to us,
Hmm.
you're a leader. If you're a parent, you're a leader. And
Hmm.
leaders are learners. And if you're not learning, you're not leading. And so I think it also takes in friendship two people that are continually wanting to learn and to grow, whether it's any relationship, a marriage,
Yeah.
a friendship, what have you. There's an ability or this drive to keep learning. I think if Tommy and I in this 30-year friendship, if either one of us just wanted to stop growing or learning, it probably would have died because there's only so much someone can do. You can't keep resuscitating a friendship. But yes, in that book, Smells Like Bacon, we have. I mean, it really is. We sat down and went, okay, what are our bacon bits of friendship? What are those things
Mhm.
that we have instituted in our life? And one of them is you never leave a man behind.
Mm.
We don't ever leave one alone, or by themselves or make them feel isolated. Another one is called the tunnel of chaos. You have to go through the tunnel of chaos to get to the tunnel of love, and that could be in marriages and in friendship. The tunnel of love is a beautiful swan. The tunnel of chaos is an ugly goose that nobody wants to sit in and deal with problems. But Tommy and I get in the tunnel of chaos because we know it doesn't just
Mhm.
stay in the tunnel of chaos, it leads to goodness. We go there. And I think those are huge. But yeah, those are all in the book. or you can call us and we'll tell you. So
Yeah, exactly. That's really true. And I would say this, Tony, you said something that I think is a misnomer, and that is that it's men who can be
mm,
isolated. I think that there's a lot of
yeah,
women who are
mm-mm,
isolated.
Yeah,
They
that's
just
right.
yeah,
hide it
yeah,
better, you
Yeah.
know?
yeah, yeah,
And I think, to be honest with you, that's one of those things that you see in the movie that is beautiful is my character and Eddie's character, they've got to learn to bear with one another, you know?
Sure.
But our wife characters, what they are two people who have felt
yeah,
isolated. And in the movie, they kind of find
yeah,
each other and go, "Oh, your life isn't as great as I thought it was," you know? And there's so many, ladies in our world today that are, they're scrolling on Instagram and
hmm
Facebook and going, everybody's else's life is better than
and they're
mine,
yeah,
you know? And
Yeah.
and so once you get close to each other, you can realize, oh,
yeah.
that's
We're
not
not. They're
true.
not suffering in
That actually
silence.
that is
Yeah. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah,
Yeah.
the better truth is that it might just really be a battle of expectations. That men just have such lower expectations than uh, than our wives, then that could just be part of the tension and all of that. So that's a really good word.
Mm.
I like that. Now, one of the things I know about my community is that they love to pray. And as this movie gets out into the wild, um, what what or how can they pray for it?
Mm.
What's the prayer?
You want to start that one, Ed?
I think more than anything, um, we we would love to continue to make faith-based, family-friendly comedies. This is the first one. This is the first faith-based, family-friendly comedy. This is the first movie where people aren't buying two tickets. Where it's a two-ticket movie. This could potentially be four tickets, six tickets. So I think the prayer would be we want to help parents, grandparents, you all to come out of the theaters being heroes. We in everything
Mm,
we do, there's humor, heart, and him. We always point it back to God. You're gonna laugh. Someone called this, well, it looks like an Adam Sandler movie without Adam Sandler. Well, no, it's really good and it's funny. You're gonna laugh. Laughter is good medicine, but with that, there's heart and we point it back to God to where you can leave the theater and you get to be the hero with you. So a prayer is, God, help this movie to have families connect and have a good time, because that laughter, oh, it could be the ointment that
mm.
you need when you leave the theater to have great significant conversations. Laughter does do that. So that would be a huge prayer. The laughter breaks down walls for truth to enter for families.
Yeah, that's huge. That's what we want. We want families to be healed. And piggybacking on what Eddie said about wanting to make more movies, we believe that, with all of the great Christian movies that have been made and will be made, there's a gaping hole of real great family humor, and we want to fill that hole because
Yeah.
we think it's
Yeah.
important. We think it's important for families to go do this together and to have fun together and to laugh together. But realistically, in the world that we've stepped into, Tony, what we've learned is that first weekend is
Yeah.
everything. And the powers that be that either say, "Yep, we'll make another movie with you," or "Nope, we won't." They're looking at that first weekend. So I would say a prayer is that this movie would do well the first weekend for the sole purpose of this our ministry being able to make more movies to encourage families more, because we've got a lot of ideas of how to encourage the family and encourage families' faith. We've got a lot of laughs in us and we want to share them
Yeah.
all. And so I think a prayer is just that this movie will do well so that we can do that. If this one does well, it opens up doors for a lot more opportunity to do
Yeah. And
that.
Tony, we know
Praise God.
people will lower their standards to be entertained.
Mm,
With this movie, you don't have to lower your standards. You're gonna laugh. You get to look on the side and see even your teenager laugh a little bit. It hits all ages, and there's no lowering your standards. There really isn't a bait and switch. Even if you're going, I've gone to the other movies, but I'm not so sure about a comedy. We do ask you to trust us. We do ask you to just give us that one step of small faith if you have no idea who we are, and trust that we are going to take care of you and your families, and it isn't a bait and switch.
Yeah, yeah, as Christians, we lower our standards, right? To go
all
to
the
a movie
time.
that
Yeah.
we're like, "Gosh, I shouldn't be going to this, but I wanna laugh." We wanna see non-believers lower their standards and go, "I don't normally go to
It
Christian
was
movies,
good.
but I'll check that one out because it looks
Yeah.
funny." And throughout our history, we've had a TV show, called Laugh with the Skit Guys, and we'll get emails from people saying, "I can't get my dad to go to church, but he loves to watch your
Yeah.
TV show,"
Mm.
or, my whoever, my aunt doesn't go to church, but she loves, yeah. So we think we've made something that you could invite an
Hmm.
unchurched friend to,
Yeah.
and I think they're gonna gobble it up.
Tony. It really is.
Yeah.
It
I'll
may not. Oh, go ahead.
no, go
Oh,
ahead. Go ahead. You're good.
I was just going to say a lot of the movies that have come out really have been for the believers, and this is still for the believer. But not a but, and with all of that, we've allowed another door to open up. Is to you can invite somebody. You can invite somebody, and they're going to have a good time. They may sit there and go, "This is a Christian movie, and it's supposed to be funny." Ugh. And they'll find themselves laughing, and they may even find themselves God touching their heart on some issues that they need to deal with. So we've created a mission field for churches to invite the unchurched to a movie, and but I think everyone will still get fed.
Mhm.
My 16-year-old gave a really high compliment. I said, "Well, what'd you think, son? I'm going to talk to these guys. What's your feedback?" And he goes, "It was all right." So I
Hey, I love
look.
it. That's great.
I'll take
Take
it.
it.
I'll
Yeah,
take it.
look, I was like, "Win, win,
That's
win."
good. That's
That's a
all
win.
right. Yeah,
That's a
yeah,
win with a
yeah,
16-year-old. It's
yeah,
all right.
yeah.
I
That's
have one more
awesome.
question for you, but before I ask it, where is the best place to learn all things Skit Guys? How can people get connected with you and follow what God's doing through your ministry?
Skitguys.tv is your best place to go. Man, you can watch free videos there. You can find out what's going on in our ministry. We've got a podcast. We've
Bedtime
got
Bible
all
stories.
sorts of fun stuff. Yeah, 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 yeah. Bedtime Bible stories. I mean, yeah. So skitguys.tv is your best place to go.
That's awesome. Okay, last question. I always love to ask people. It's an advice question. I'm going to ask you to give yourself one piece of advice, except I get to name the time. And in this particular case, I want to take you back to the day after your very first skit together. So if you could pull up a chair and sit knee to knee with a younger version of yourself and look that young man in the eyes before everything's about to change in his life, what's the one piece of advice you're going to give him?
Hmm. I wish I would have learned sooner that um, let Eddie be Eddie and you be Tommy,
Mm,
and don't don't compete with one another. We spent a few years competing with one another, and once we learned that lesson, and it took a few years, you know. I think once we learned to let the other person be the other person, and you just be you. I wish I would have learned that sooner.
Yeah. Probably be gentle on yourself, kid. There's a lot of
Mm,
beating yourself up over what you could have done, should have done, would have done. Especially back in those early days when no one's really asking you to do it for a job. It's just you're going from church to church for gas money and chicken dinner. But there's something maybe inside you, like to harken back to your first word, calling. There was a calling. There was
mm,
something about it that we were doing skits differently, Tony. Most skits in the 80s were very cheesy. You got to Jesus very quickly. The third sentence, Jesus was introduced with scripture that backed it up. And that was the cough medicine. Oh, okay. They're up there doing a skit, but they said Jesus, they're okay. And we were stealing stuff from Saturday Night Live and trying to make a Christian. So very hard to do.
that's hard to
But
do. Yeah.
there was this thing instilled in you when you would get in the truck, when we get in the truck, and it was, God, this is good. This is good. And then but there isn't a platform for this. There isn't we're going to be youth ministers. This isn't going to go anywhere, but there was a burning
mm.
desire inside you, and I wish I could have been more gentle on myself, instead of maybe drivenness or beating yourself up or anything. But I think it's a good, yeah, be gentle on yourself, kid.
That's great. Guys, thank you so much for being so generous with your time. Thank you for putting good comedy out into the world. And I can't wait to see what God does through this movie. So thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Tony.
Oh, thank you, Tony, and thank you for your kind words.